So guys, last season didn't go the way the Washington Commanders had hoped. Injuries, especially to Jayden Daniels, made it difficult for this team to build any real momentum, and the results reflected that. But heading into 2026, things feel a little different. The Commanders made several important moves this offseason, and because of those changes, many believe this team has a real chance to take a step forward. However, not everyone is convinced. PFF has just released a new prediction for Washington's 2026 season, and it's already sparked plenty of debate among fans. So, is their projection actually fair? Or could the Commanders surprise a lot of people this year? Let's talk about it. What's up, Commanders Nation? Welcome to the NFL Playbook, Commanders. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Alright, so let's get straight into what PFF actually said. They ran the numbers for every single team in the league, and this isn't just some random guess. This is based on analytics, data, simulations, all of that. And when they got to Washington, the number they landed on was 766 wins. Now, obviously, you can't win .66 of a game, but that's the average outcome when they simulate the season over and over. And here's the thing, that number puts the Commanders right around the middle of the pack, kind of in that just okay bucket, not a great team, not a bad team, just kind of there. If you go check the sports books, you'll see Washington is sitting at about 7.5 wins for their over total too. So honestly, PFF's number is not that far off from what Vegas thinks either. Both are basically saying the same thing. This is a team that could go either way, and it really depends on how the season plays out. Now let's get into why PFF actually landed on that number, because there are real reasons behind it. Strength of schedule is probably the biggest one. According to the data, Washington has one of the toughest schedules in the league this year, ranked around 6th hardest overall. And when you look at how the season opens up, it's brutal. They're playing at the Eagles, then at the Cowboys, and then hosting the Seahawks, all within the first 3 weeks. That's the defending division favorite, a Cowboys team a lot of people think should actually be the favorite, and the reigning Super Bowl champions all in a row. That's about as tough of an opening stretch as you're going to find anywhere in the league. And it's not just those 3 teams either. Throughout the year, Washington is facing legitimate playoff caliber opponents, teams like the Rams, the 49ers, and the Jaguars, mixed in with divisional games against a much improved Giants team twice. A lot of these opponents are also hard to project because they've got their own question marks. Some quarterbacks are coming off injuries, some coaching staffs are brand new, some rosters turned over a ton this offseason. So, when PFF runs 1,000 simulations for a schedule like this, you get a wide range of outcomes, and that naturally pulls the average win total down. Think about it from a pure numbers standpoint. When a model is trying to figure out how many games a team wins, it doesn't just look at Washington in a vacuum, it looks at every single opponent on the schedule and simulates all of those matchups too. So if the model thinks 8 or 9 of Washington's opponents are above average teams, that alone drags the projection down no matter how good Washington itself actually is. That's just the nature of strength of schedule-based projections. They're really punishing when your division and your out-of-conference matchups both happen to be loaded in the same year. On top of the schedule, there's the injury history to think about. We all know Jayden Daniels dealt with injuries last year, and it completely changed the trajectory of the season. If you're being cautious with your projections, you have to build in the possibility he misses a few games again, and that alone shaves wins off the total. Then there's the defense, which is still a bit of an unknown quantity. Yes, they added talent. Yes, they brought in Daronte Jones to run things, but new schemes take time to click. You're asking guys like Daron Payne and new addition Javon Kinlaw to buy into a completely different system, and with young pieces like Marshon Lattimore, Trey Amos, Mike Sainristil still, and Quan Martin still developing under a new scheme. There's a real transition period where everything needs time to gel. So, when you stack up the tough schedule, the injury risk, and a defense that still needs to prove itself under a new system, you can see exactly why PFF landed where they did. And honestly, that transition period is a real thing. It's not just an excuse people make up. Anytime you bring in a new coordinator and a handful of new starters at the same time, there's a communication gap that has to close before the unit is playing fast and instinctive instead of thinking too much. Defenses especially need that chemistry. Guys have to trust that the guy next to them is going to be where he's supposed to be, and that kind of trust only comes from actual game reps together, not just practice. So it's completely reasonable for a model to build in a slower start for this defense before it hits its stride. Now here's why a lot of people are pushing back on this number and think it's too low. Honestly, the biggest reason is health, plain and simple. If Jayden Daniels plays close to a full season, 16, 17 games, this offense looks completely different than the one that struggled through injuries last year. When he's healthy, he's one of the most dynamic players in this league, and that alone can be the difference between a 7-win season and a 10-win season. People also point to the defensive investment this offseason, and this wasn't just adding a name here or there. This was a full-scale upgrade. Bringing in Daronte Jones as the new defensive play caller, adding Javon Kinlaw up front to replace Jonathan Allen, and building around returning corner Marshon Lattimore and Daron Payne. Think about how bad this defense actually was last year. One of the worst units in the league at stopping the run and generating pressure. Even a modest jump from rock bottom to just average already changes close losses into wins. And this offseason wasn't modest, it was an overhaul at almost every level. Front seven, secondary, and the guy calling the shots. And it's worth pointing out, sometimes when you make this many changes at once, the results actually come faster than people expect, not slower. If the new pieces are as talented as they look on paper, and if the coaching staff does a good job simplifying things early so guys can play fast instead of thinking too much, you could see this defense look respectable by week 1 instead of needing half a season to figure itself out. There's also an argument about the timing of that brutal early schedule actually working in Washington's favor. Would you rather play your toughest stretch when nobody's seen your new offense or defense yet? Or later in the year once teams have had film to prepare? Facing the Eagles, Cowboys, and Seahawks early before anyone's seen what David Blow, Daronte Jones, and this new coaching staff want to do schematically could actually be a small advantage. And then there's the offensive weapons angle. Washington has been busy building depth around Terry McLaurin, Jalen Lane, and Dyami Brown, and there's real buzz about Stefon Diggs potentially joining this receiving room as a free agent, which would give Jayden Daniels another proven veteran target. More weapons usually means more explosive plays, and more explosive plays usually means more wins. Depth matters too. Last year when injuries piled up, this team didn't have enough proven bodies to plug in and keep things rolling. This offseason clearly addressed that, and it turns a rough 3-game stretch into a manageable one instead of a season-derailing one. On top of all that, people bring up the front office continuity. Adam Peters and Dan Quinn know exactly what they're building here, and ownership under Josh Harris has put real resources behind that plan instead of just talking about it. Compare that to other teams sitting around that same 7.5 win range, dealing with quarterback controversies or coaching uncertainty. Washington just doesn't have that same noise around the building, so where does that lead me? Honestly, I get why PFF landed on 7.66. It's a fair number if you're being conservative, building in some injury risk, and respecting how hard this schedule is. Nobody can say that logic is crazy, but personally, I just can't get there with them. If Jayden Daniels stays on the field, and that's a big if, I know, but if he does, I think this offense takes a real jump. And I think this defense, with Daronte Jones calling the shots and the talent added up front and in the secondary, is going to be a completely different animal than what we saw last year. Put those two things together, a healthy quarterback playing at a high level, and a defense that's actually reliable for the first time in a while, and I just don't see this as a 7-win team. My number, and I'm being honest with you guys, is somewhere between 9 and 10 wins. I think this roster is a lot better than an 8-win roster, and even with that brutal early stretch, I think they find a way to steal at least one of those first 3 games. Maybe more if things go their way. Then, once the schedule lightens up in the back half of the season, I think they take full advantage of it, and that's usually how these conservative projections end up getting proven wrong. A team that starts a little rough but finishes strong once the toughest part of the schedule is behind them. I also think it matters that this isn't a team relying on one single thing going right. It's not just hoping the quarterback stays healthy, it's not just hoping the defense improves, it's both of those things happening together, plus better depth, plus more continuity up top. When multiple areas of a roster improve at the same time, the overall record usually jumps by more than people expect, because it's not just one problem getting fixed, it's several problems getting fixed at once. That's the kind of offseason Washington had, and that's exactly why I think 9 or 10 wins is realistic instead of wishful thinking. Yeah, it's a leap of faith on health, I'll admit that. But every single year we talk about this team's ceiling, and every single year injuries get in the way of finding out what that ceiling actually is. This year I'm choosing to believe in the talent, in the coaching staff, and in Jayden Daniels finally getting a full runway to show what he can do. Projections like this exist for a reason. They're built to be cautious and account for worst-case scenarios. But I've watched this team closely enough to know that when Jayden Daniels is out there and healthy, the ceiling on this offense is a lot higher than a 7-win team. And paired with a defense that finally has real talent, I think Washington competes with anybody on this schedule, not just the easier teams on it. And if I'm wrong about this, fine, but I'd rather bet on the talent and the health than bet against a team that's clearly better on paper than it was a year ago.